Okay, hello and welcome to our video on surds. So still in algebra, so what is a surd? A surd is basically just a square root. It's a fancy word for a square root, okay? So that's a surd, it's a square root of 2. So if you put the square root of 2 into your calculator and you look for the decimal point button, it'll give you something like this. It'll be 1.414, I think there's a 2 after that, but anyway, it keeps going. So the idea is that a surd is more accurate than this, because this, no matter how many decimal points you put in, there's still going to be more decimal points afterwards, and obviously you're not going to write the whole things out. So if you just write it as the square root of 2, that counts as this whole thing and all the decimal points that go afterwards. It's just an easy way of writing it, okay? And they're actually quite handy to work with. They look a bit ugly, but they're fine, okay? So just some things. The square root of 4 isn't a surd because it just equals to 2, because 2 by 2 is going to be equal to 4, so that isn't a surd. It's only things like square root of 2, square root of 5, square root of 7, things that can't be simplified, okay? Another thing is, so when you have an equation like x squared is equal to 4, okay, so obviously you know that that's going to be x is equal to 2, because 2 by 2 is going to be equal to 4, yeah? So that was fine for the junior cert, but for the leaving cert, you're going to have to write x is equal to plus or minus 2, okay? Just because now, so remember, anything with a quadratic is there's going to have 2 answers to it, so you have to write plus or minus 2, because obviously 2 by 2 is going to be 4, but also minus 2 multiplied by minus 2 is also going to be 4, okay? So just bear that in mind when you have an answer. So like x is equal to something, it has to be plus or minus 2 if you're getting the square root of something. Okay, just to bear that in mind. So now we're going to go through some of the rules of surds, okay? First rule we'll say is if the square root, the square root of AB can be simplified into the square root of A multiplied by the square root of B, okay? This is best shown with an example. So this is what you're going to do when you want to break a surd up into a simpler form. So if you have the square root of 8, we're going to break that up into the square root of 4 multiplied by the square root of 2. That's because 4 by 2 is equal to 8. So if you can separate it into 2 factors, you can separate it. You can write it like this, okay? And the reason we're doing that is because then we can write it like 2 square root 2, or 2 square root 2. So this is just a simpler way of writing it, kind of, instead of square root 8. It might be handy if you have, say, square root of 8 over 2, then you can, if you have this over 2, you know, you can cancel the 2 2's, okay? So this way of doing it's just a simpler way of writing it. So the idea is you're not just breaking the square root of 8 up into random numbers. You have to break it up into, you don't have to, but if you want to simplify it, you have to break it up into a number that is a square itself. So 4, for example, you can get the square root of 4 as a normal number. So if you broke it up into something else, so there's no other factors of 8. If you broke it up into the square root of 1 by the square root of 8, that wouldn't make any sense. You'd still have the square root of 8, but in this case here, you can break it up into 2 square 2, okay? So that's the idea with this rule here. Rule 2, we'll do a different color. The square root of A over B is equal to the square root of A over the square root of B. Okay, so this is handy if you have something like the square root of 4 over 9. That's equal to the square root of 4 over the square root of 9, which is equal to 2 over 3. Okay, so this is quite handy. And I know I said you have to put plus or minus, but not for something like this, because you're just simplifying it, if you get me. So if you were looking for an answer, x equal to, then you'd have to put the plus or minus, but since you're just simplifying it, you don't have to put the plus or minus. So those are the two. Those are basically the two biggest rules of surds, kind of. I'll give another. Actually, I'll give one more rule as well that sometimes people kind of just are a bit unsure about. So you can treat a surd like any other number. So I'll just write it as number 3. For example, if you had 2x plus 3x, that's obviously going to be equal to 5x. So you just add the 2 and 3 together. Okay. So I'll get rid of that. So I'm actually gonna circle there. So if we have 2 the square root of 2 plus 3 the square root of 2, that's the exact same. You can treat this square root of 2 like an x. We're just going to have 5 the square root of 2, okay? So you treat surds just like anything else. yeah, that's about it. So we're gonna look at some examples, and so they'll make much more sense when you have examples to like in front of you, so you can see exactly how this is useful and how they're applied. Okay, hope this video was helpful. Thank you.